The two developments follow very closely on the heels of the yet-to-be-resolved controversy over the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, particularly the contentious issue of the demand for mandatory real-time electronic transmission of results in Clause 60 of the bill. Concerns have been expressed by strong advocates of mandatory real-time electronic transmission of results that its non-inclusion will give rise to the manipulation and rigging of elections, especially with the provision of an option for manual collation and transmission in the bill as a backup. On the other hand, those who advocate the two-way system, that is, electronic transmission and the manual backup, accuse proponents of the mandatory real-time electronic transmission of results of harboring ulterior motives, such as using technology to manipulate election outcomes by hacking INEC servers and other similar cyber threats. So, what are the issues with the dates and sequencing of the election timetable, considering that the released timetable is based strictly on constitutional and statutory provisions, which clearly stipulates the time frames for conduct of elections in any election year. Should those days be tinkered with, as is being suggested in some quarters, to satisfy the interests of any group? With such adjustments aligned with legal requirements, will it be constitutional? And how far can and will this be extended in the future? Now, if a group of people are capable of compromising the security communication systems of government, and most of all, that of the national security advisor of a country, what will desperate politicians not do to capture power? Dubiously, by negatively deploying technology. How can the integrity of elections be guaranteed knowing that technology can be utilized, as in this case, to interfere with and or disrupt the process? How does the El-Rufai disclosure speak and relate to the cyber security of our electoral processes and systems? This is one issue that should not be muddled up with other allegations that have been flying around for days now from the same source. So these are the issues that we will be taking a very hard look at today on the program. Let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll meet our guests who are already in the studio.
Focus Nigeria. It's a huge task, but we take it on.
I think that is the law.
National Assembly is not doing hearing on insecurity in Nigeria. It is America that is doing hearing on insecurity in Nigeria.
Monday to Friday on Focus Nigeria, we identify the nagging issues.
Some people put people in poverty deliberately, deliberate misplacement of priorities, and brought people on their knees to suffer.
We seek answers to the tough challenges.
And because of
For
this
the former president,
yes,
what I know is that he has not turned his membership card. He has not been attending your meeting.
leave that to us to deal.
There's no shying away from the
The
issues.
system is held accountable. The leaders are accountable for the funds, for the resources that they manage.
No sitting on the fence.
The same thing that made you live where you are may confront you.
Focus Nigeria, 10 a.m., Monday to Friday on AIT.
All right, thank you so much. Let's get to meet our guests, some of whom are already in the studio. Joining us now is Sophia Akusin. She is the Head Research and Knowledge Management at Yaga Africa. Thank you so much, Sophia, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Barrister Victor Okpatola. Barrister Okpatola is the convener of Lawyers for Civil Liberties. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
for
much.
joining us.
Thank you.
We also expect to join us in the course of the discussion by Mr. Victor Idono. Mr. Idono is a senior cybersecurity consultant, a certified network security specialist, a certified ethical hacker and computer hacking forensic investigator. He should be joining us very shortly. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this way. The INEC timetable has come under some, well, sharp criticism from certain quarters. Yet, the argument has been made that, look, this is what is stipulated by the law, by the Constitution, and by other extant electoral regulations and laws. First, what is your reaction to that, to that timetable which was put out last week?
So thank you so much. For me, first is that I welcome the development personally of the release of the timetable because it's in line with the provisions of the current Electoral Act, which is the 2022 Electoral Act, which requires that the notice of election should be issued not later than 360 days to the next election. And if you look at the proposed date for the presidential election as it is stated on the timetable is 20th of February 2027, which means that INEC has released the Electoral Act adequately within the time expected based on the current law. And you also not blame INEC for releasing this because the current electoral reforms is not yet concluded. And this also respond to the questions, why is INEC releasing the timetable? INEC will be in breach of the current act if INEC does not release the notice of this election as it has released, that was last week, 13th of February 2026. And this process of electoral amendment started since 2023. So the question citizens should be asking is, why is it that this has not been concluded? Remember that the last electoral amendment was concluded and assented in 2022. It means it was assented by the president 1 year ahead of the elections. And if you remember, there were lots of back and forth, even between the National Assembly and the presidency, and the president as at then, to pass the electoral law. And it was still concluded in 2022, a year before the elections. Yes, the House of Reps were nearly voted on their own session. It's the Senate that just did that about a week ago. So if it's not intentional to cause a lot of confusion, why is it that this is not concluded since 2023 till date? So INEC did well because INEC is still operating under the law, the Electoral Act 2022.
2022,
Yeah.
which is the subsisting law as of today.
As of today. But I know that the challenge is that there's a proposal for a review in timeline from the last Senate voting that we saw. And this is what citizens and some concerned political actors or political observers believe that it might also mandate INEC that if the law is passed and if there's a change in this timeline, INEC might be forced to issue another timetable, and a revised timetable, as the case will be. And this will also currently there are lots of confusion. People are still, and that's why people are debating whether the release of the timetable is right or not right. So these are some of the confusion that makes manipulations thrive, and these are the things we as stakeholders should discourage and not encourage.
So, Barrister, from a legal point of view, should INEC be operating a law that does not exist, or should rely on subsisting law?
INEC has no option. It's the only the only law guiding INEC as of today is the Electoral Act. The one being debated, proposed amendments being debated, in the National Assembly, is still proposed. It's not yet a substantive law. So INEC is guided. INEC, by compulsion, INEC must follow the stipulations of the 2022 Electoral Act. Every other thing that is being debated at the National Assembly, as at now, is still inchoate at best. It's not yet law. So until then, what is guiding INEC, what is a compulsion on INEC is the 2022 Electoral Act.
So let's come to the issues, some of the issues that have been raised about the calendar that was put out. The major one is the fact that it coincides with a religious festivity, and that it will likely disenfranchise so many people of that religion when it happens. Is this the first time that we are having elections, or any elections for that matter, that coincides with a religious festivity?
I think for national elections, this in recent times, this will likely be the first, but I can't say that for off-cycle elections because I've not checked the data, the statistics. But again, we need to be conscious of the constitutional provision for elections, because election dates are guided by the provisions of the Constitution, which states that elections must be conducted not later than 150, not earlier than 150 days, and not later than 30 days before the expiration of the date. It means we have between January 30th and April 28th to conclude elections, and these elections are not just one-day elections, because there are opportunities for rerun, and all elections. It means all elections must be concluded, whether there's runoff or rerun, must be concluded by April 30th. So, yes, people have argued, and the argument is gaining momentum in the public space, that there's going to be Ramadan, there's going to be Lent within the period. It means we have between just January 30th and February 7th. I think Ramadan is starting after January 7th. That means we have just that window to conduct elections, or we move the elections to the other. And the question is, do we think that this time is enough for us to manage elections? And people should also not forget that there are lots of other things that we need to put into context. I don't know if people remember that even the National Electoral Commissions, we have 4 that are going, their tenure is coming to an end by September this year, and we have 6 by 22nd of February next year. That means we're sure of going to the elections with 2 current national commissioners. So these are some of the factors. And I know that, yes, INEC is an institution, and it's also, we have a civil service or bureaucracy that is also managing it, so this should not cause the gap. But the question is, and we have a history, until the last general elections, since 2011, we've always been postponing elections, whether a day to elections or on the election day or a week to elections. Until the last general election, that was the first election that was managed, that held on the day on the calendar. And this is also due to issues around preparations and others. And these are the confusions we're talking about. But if I may ask, and this is a personal question, I know that Nigeria is a very religious country, and people are very sensitive to things related to their religion. But the question is a dating. And are we saying that people don't go about doing the activities even during fasting period? I know that people go to work, people do some other things. But again, the question is to ask, how feasible, how doable is it for us to organize this election? Since Lent is for 40 days and Ramadan is for 30 days, and we have to conclude all elections, including the governorship elections and all the rerun by April 28th. And just to add, to say that will it be an option to have all the elections in one day? Is it an option we want to consider at the moment? And what are those issues we need to look at? And drawing from the fact that there's also the speculation around change in election timetable. So these are some of the confusions and some of the things I think the political elites are intentionally causing in the society, aside from the fact that, yes, the fasting period is sensitive to some people's religious belief.
All right, let's welcome Mr. Victor Idono. Mr. Idono, like we said earlier on, is a cyber security consultant, a certified network security specialist, a certified ethical hacker, and computer hacking forensic investigator. Thank you so much, Mr. Idono, for joining us.
Thank you.
But before I come to you, let me quickly just flow from what Sophia talked about now, because I'm aware that the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, and the Senate are reconvening tomorrow. And they are likely going to be deliberating. One of the issues they are likely to deliberate on is this calendar, this timetable for elections by INEC. Now, are you expecting a situation where the National Assembly would most likely try to tinker with the law as it is today, in order to satisfy the yearnings of those who say, look, this will infringe on our religious ceremonies and festivities.
Okay, at this point, what will be done tomorrow is most likely a reconciliation of what the House of Representatives has done and what the Senate has done so far. But don't let us forget.
I think that would be the responsibility of the conference committee. But this is the entire House reconvening in emergency session.
You know, don't let's forget that this issue that just came up in regards to the timetable, when it falls into, you know, it's a recent issue that just came up. What has always been on the table, you know, for a while now is whether or not we draw back the election timetable in order to allow enough time, you know, when it comes to during the last election. 2023 election. After the election, an issue arose in regards to maybe there is enough time. Which the issue that arose was in regards to the election petition period, whether the election petition period of the 100 days should be within the time frame of the existing incumbent president, or it should subsequently push a little bit away from it. That is what is on the National Assembly's table. But currently, this one, I don't actually think, you know, the National Assembly will want to venture into that. I don't see the National Assembly venturing into that.
All right. It's necessary to put some of these in perspective. You talked earlier on, I asked earlier on whether or not some of these elections in the past had fallen into such religious festivities. I recall that in 2019 general elections coincided with the Lent period. Lent actually began on March 6, 2019, and the governorship elections were held on March 9, 2019, which was the first Saturday of Lent, and it went on unhindered. Again, the presidential and National Assembly elections in 2023 took place on February 25th, 2023, just 3 days after Lent began. And there were no issues raised. And of course, in 1999, the general elections, Lent began on February 17th, 1999. The presidential election that ushered in President Olusegun Obasanjo was held on February 27, 1999, during the electing season. So there are precedents. A number of precedents, and some of them actually also coincided with Muslim festivities and all of that. I know that I have also covered elections in other African countries, democratic elections, which coincided with religious celebrations, and because it was constitutional, they went ahead. I can remember one particular one, 2012, in Accra, Ghana. I was covering that election. And the runoff election after the presidential election fell on a Sunday, which was also a Muslim festivity day. And both religions unanimously agreed to postpone their celebrations until after that election on that day. So there are precedents. But Mr. Idono, welcome.
Thank you.
We are looking is the disclosure this.
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, to wiretapping, by way of explanation, is simply gaining unauthorized access to communication channels. It can be telephone lines as of old, but as of currently, they are digital platforms or digital means of communication. So if anybody could actually gain access to a communication line and listen to conversations, the person has successfully wiretapped. But in a situation where we find ourselves now, the question we need to ask is, who are those authorized to actually wiretap anybody or any conversation, listen to any conversation. These are things or activities that are restricted to government-authorized agencies like the NSA, the DSS, and all of that. But when an individual now comes up and be like, he has been able to gain access to those kind of conversations, then it poses a serious national security and, of course, a threat, as stated. But again, how can this happen? It can happen in so many ways. If one and only there is a compromise from the technology providers. For example, if the communication channel is by one of the telecom providers, which I wouldn't want to mention any name, and someone have an insider who could give you either a special login or a credential or is able to pull data logs for you. Sometimes it may not be 100% conversation. It can be just communication logs. Who did you call at what time from how lengthy was the conversation? There are logs for devices that received and made the conversations. In fact, where those conversations were received, it keeps detailed logs of all of this. So in technological terms, sometimes the telecom providers have it under their CDR, where you can have all of these logs in place. So someone can gain access to that data. It is not by just saying there must be an insider within the technology provider that has one way or the other provided access to that information.
Given the scenario that you have painted, how secure can government business and government secrets be?
100% secure, 100% secure in the sense there is no system that is actually 100% secure, but considering that in our today's technological era, there are encryptions that can not easily be bypassed or decrypted, there are technologies already in place to ensure that communication channels are encrypted, and decrypting it is not just something that is an end-to-end encryption. So with end-to-end encryption, anybody can just break into that access without an insider giving access to something.
So what you are suggesting is that what has happened, or the disclosure made by the former governor of Kaduna State, indicates that it was an insider.
Yes, you can't, as we speak, you can't just come in and say you have your individual technology that can gain direct access to somebody. Someone within the system is granting some level of access to whatever the claims are.
Now, again, the question to ask is how long do you think this has been going on? For the former governor to publicly disclose that he had access to information of the Office of the National Security Advisor, not any other government. If the National Security Advisor can be compromised, then of course.
Well, with regards to
we'll come back to you very, very quickly.
Okay.
The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is right now in Adamawa, Yola in Adamawa State. He's on a state visit to that state, and we will be going off on this terrestrial transmission to join that visit and the ceremonies that follow. Of course, we will continue on all our other channels with this program. Stay with us. All right, so let's get back to you.
Okay, so as I was saying, with regards to that, how long has this been happening? There have been cases I have personally been involved in trying to decrypt as to investigate. I'll give you a scenario. A mobile phone can be handed to you. If an audit was not carried out on that mobile device before it's been handed to you, there are possibilities that the persons that deployed it, installed it, purchased it, have installed bugs and some malwares on the device before handing over to you. So there is that tendency where this device has actually been infiltrated before it was handed over to you. It has happened in Nigeria with some political class, which I would also want to disclose due to confidentiality. But yes, in reality, I can prepackage a device, pre-installed malwares on it to be able to eavesdrop on any conversation you're having, and that device can get into the hands of a high-profile political personnel. And in that case, whatever conversation, communication, be it WhatsApp message, SMS, and all of that, they can be access can be granted onto them. So there is a responsibility by the security personnel around him to actually do an internal audit, testing all of the devices that they are using for their communication, either their laptops, their mobile phones, to be sure that there is no external threat in those devices pre-configured before they even purchase them. Devices heading to NSA, I can tell you that the contractor or whoever that is going to supply those equipment, we definitely have some level of conversation with one or two persons. And there are cases where these devices, even from the manufacturer, let's not leave any stone unturned. As a manufacturer from the West, know fully well that your gadgets are high-end profile gadgets and they are going to top-profile government officials. You can decide to play around with them, install some things on them, and at the end of the day, as conversations are ongoing, you're receiving your feedback from the comfort of your home. So a lot of times, there can be exploits from the end of the technology itself. Then if that device is actually deployed whole, clean, then there must be someone insider somewhere at the communication gateway that is granting access, that unauthorized access to that data. He is using his personal profile to infiltrate that system. Breaking into systems doesn't just happen overnight.
Well, the next question which arises from all of what you have talked about now is the fact that there's been a breach of security.
Unverified.
Well, the former governor said, we have our ways. He said, we have our ways.
Yes.
Could be any of the ways that you have described here now,
Yes.
right now. That means that there are other persons or groups outside of government that also have their ways of infiltrating or impeaching the communication systems which they want to actually so to say, we want to breach, as it were. Now, the question then comes up, what have they been doing with that kind of information that they have been getting from such breach?
Well, personally, I would say that it can also be a mind game. A mind game in the sense, I can tell you by virtue of maybe I have an insider that is around you that must have overheard one particular conversation. He's able to fix some pieces together and share with me, and I can come out and say, I've been wiretapping into your communications. So until proven otherwise, until verified, we cannot really just conclude that, yes, these assertions are true. So, but again, if they are true, what else are they looking for this kind of information for, aside for political gains, aside from making decisions that will definitely either for opposition or for party gains, as the case may be.
There are also security issues around. This is the office of the NSA.
Yes.
It's the National Security Advisor.
Exactly.
And you are well aware of the kind of security situation we have in our country today.
Yes.
So a lot of security information could actually have been breached. If
that is true, a lot has actually been breached, because for the boldness to actually come up and say XYZ
on national television,
on a national TV, then there is, I'm very sure that he has some facts and some things he could present in the advent of if we want to actually investigate. But again, this kind of information, it means there's a lot that the NSA has to answer within the system, ranging from even the consultants, the contractors, because we are all aware that most of these projects are managed by external contractors. They are managed by external consultants. And the team insiders within the system, they also have some level of say on the system. So if there's a breach of this nature, then we can comfortably say that a lot of confidential information is in the wrong hands. And it can, in a huge way, affect the security challenges that we are trying to solve in Nigeria. Because if you're passing a supposed encrypted message or a confidential information and it gets into the wrong hands, of course, they will use that information to re-strategize and evade whatever security policies or strategies you've put in place.
Counter your own strategy.
To exactly counter. So it is a huge problem, but for me, I would say let's investigate and get to the root of it to be sure that, yes, to what level of extent is this breach? To what extent has it taken place? What is the impact? What kind of information have gotten into the wrong hands?
How much damage has been done?
How much damage has been done? And again, this is just coming from one person. How many persons of that category have access to even more or higher or more confidential information? So there's a lot of things around this space that we need to look at. And in looking at this, we need to be sure. We need to do a lot of investigation. Forensics, the logs are there. Who has been gaining access to what? At what time, for how long, from which device, from what location? There are a lot of things that can actually be gathered for forensic evidence. And until these things actually prove otherwise, I think it could actually be a mind game. But until then, we never want to leave any stone unturned.
Sophia, let me relate this to our political situation. At the moment, there is a lot of agitation about real-time electronic transmission of results. And here we are, incidentally, having this conversation about wiretapping and possible hacking of government information. And any government institution can be a victim to this. There have been suggestions in the last few days since this disclosure that indeed those who are insisting on real-time electronic transmission are doing so for ulterior motives, that they may have already perfected a plan to hack into INEC cyber systems and all of that, with the aim of manipulating future elections.
So this is actually an interesting argument because, first of all, election transmission has been with us since 2015. It's not a new scenario or a new development in our election administration. So I don't know why people are worried about it. Then secondly, the election transmission is supposed to bring about transparency and prevent another physical hacking, because manipulation, we understand that election result management is the weakest link in our election management. One of the weakest link outside logistics is even the weakest, in my own opinion. And that's why we're saying that. So why are people talking about real time? I think we need to come back to sensitizing citizens on what we mean by real-time transmission. The real-time transmission is not saying that once you, because the argument last week was that the technology, apart from the new argument that's coming up, was the fact that we don't have the infrastructure. But the question is, it's not about infrastructure. It's about sending it. So just imagine because election results are counted at the polling unit, and you're expected to snap and send and transmit it so that there will be a backup. And the proposal was to have both manual and electronic for a confirmation to ensure transparency and to ensure that people are doing the right thing. Yes. So imagine that I don't have real time. I'm supposed to move from point A to point C. And on my way from point A to point C, I decide to change the result and snap it. So what is the value of the manipulation? And why are people making it look like the transmission is a new thing? As if you're saying that once you snap, you send it. I remember that we have record that shows that election transmission has been working well in this country. Do you know that the last Anambra election shows over 90% of results uploaded? Even the 2023 elections that we are shouting and screaming, most of the election results were out within 72 hours. The House of Reps, the Senate work, it was a presidential, and the presidential, there was a delay. So the question is, why are we fighting against what has been part of the system, what was test run? It started with the by-elections in Nasarawa State some years back, before the off-season election in 2020 in Edo and Ondo State. And since then, it has been perfectly done well. Even the Osun elections, I remember in 2022, remember that before 10 o'clock, almost all the results were out. And that was what made INEC to rush their election coalition system. And by 5 a.m., election results were announced. So what are the challenges in terms of hacking? I would like to say that for every system, there's always an attempt to infiltrate the system. whether it's even the collation, and that's the reason why we're doing result counting at the polling unit. In some client, you go to the collation before you count the result, and this is to avoid intruders. So what is left for the people managing is to come up with measures to ensure that we avoid and counter it. Are we saying that because of hacking, why are we still managing our registry, our NIMSI, our citizens registry or using technology? Why are we not doing manual? Because we know that it can be infiltrated. Even the telecommunication is being synced. Everything is going back to tech. Why are we bringing the argument when it comes to election? Why are we not looking at other aspects of the country? So for me, this is an argument to discourage and to do away with an opportunity that will create transparency in the election management system.
The agitators for this, well, I always like to emphasize it, real-time electronic transmission, appear to lose sight of the provisions of the Electoral Act 2022, Section 60, Section 64, 4B, and even the various clauses in the INEC guidelines and regulations,
yes,
which clearly spells out transmission and collation. These things are already provided for in the law. Why is there this renewed agitation for real-time electronic transmission?
I think...
is it that the laws, as they are today, the Electoral Act, the provisions of these sections that we talk about are not strong enough?
The effort now is to put a compulsion on INEC so that INEC will not...
no, the law already says so.
No, you know, when you look at the last
it
election...
says shall.
When you look at the last election, in regards to whether or not INEC can, you know, electronically transmit this result, or they use manual method, you know, as the case may be. When it goes
there is a combination, like she says, a combination of the manual
INEC
and the
guidelines
electronic.
says, you know, all these things is an effort not to go back, not to fall back into the errors and the problems of the last election. That's all this effort. So the main argument is, apart from pure electronic transmission of results and manual, the other part of the argument is to put a compulsion on INEC to ensure that INEC has no discretion, so that on that day, you know, there will not be excuse of, okay, you know, during the last election, the INEC chairman came out on multiple forums, mentioned that what INEC would do is to electronically transmit this result in Nigeria.
It's there in the regulations and it's there in the Electoral Act.
It is there, but what I'm saying is that
so
there's a discretion.
the obvious. He was saying, the INEC chairman was saying the obvious. It was not something he manufactured himself.
He said it. But it was the outcome from the election litigation. You know, all these sections were put before the court, and the court said, yes, INEC has discretion. When you look at the guideline, INEC has discretion whether or not at the appropriate time to, you know, to use the electronic transmission result or to use the manual method. And instances where it used the manual method...
Does the mandatory nature of this proposal do away completely with the manual processes?
That is the agitation on the lips of so many persons. Yeah. To remove the discretion that INEC exercised at the late hour was what caused a lot of issues.
Do you think that is, and this is to both of you, do you think that is a proper thing to do away completely with the manual aspect of it? Because these are processes.
No, let's look at the mischief here. People that advocate that the manual process should be done away with, I think it would be easier to look at the mischief, what both parties are trying to guide against, then we can reach a conclusion on whether it is right or wrong. Now, those that are saying pure electronic transmission of results, they have seen instances where within the collation center, within the polling unit and the collation center, a lot of miracle happen within that period. They've seen instances of alteration, brazen, wicked alteration of result defacing the sheet itself. That is part of what they're trying to guide against.
I just want to talk about this electronic. So people are saying, for me, the argument has always been, let's have electronic transmission in addition to the manual collation.
Yeah, because
That's
you must,
what it
because
was, even
it's
at the
not-
last
because you
election.
must fill it,
Yeah.
you must
Yes.
fill the
Yeah.
necessary forms.
And
that's manual.
And it's to have that while you're collating at the collation center, you check whether there's a
I think the
correlation
argument,
between
the argument is which takes priority over the other. So now, once it is transmitted, once it is snapped and transmitted, because all this it looks as if it's a special technology, you know,
Transmitted
just
to where?
simple to the INEC server.
No,
It's to
this,
INEC.
because most
But let me
of
just-
what I've heard is transmission to IREP. The IREP is not the collation portal.
yes.
No, see,
It's
let
not
me
relation.
let me just land on that. Now, the major argument is which should be superior. Is it the transmitted copy that should be superior over the manual copy? In case there is difference between what was transmitted and in the long run what is in the manual copy. That is the main fulcrum of the argument. And those that are advocating that it should be pure transmission, they are also advocating that what should supersede is the content of what was electronically transmitted, even where the manual is manipulated or there's difference between both of them.
Yeah, so I think another argument is it's beyond that. The argument is whether it should be transmitted in real time or not. You know, initially, after the first vote from the Senate, there was an argument of them taking out the electronic transmission.
Yes.
And after the emergency meeting they had about last week,
They
I guess,
restored
they restored it, but introduced
transmission.
the issue of real time or not real time. And that's why our advocacy is clear to say that adopt the proposal from House of Reps that requires. So the introduction of this real time is what is also causing the new issue of whether it should be transmitted on real time, because they said there was a provision that in a situation where this is not possible, you must not translate real time. That was the argument of whether real time or not. And that was why we're saying that we need to also sensitize people on what real time means. We're not saying that it must hit the server 1 minute immediately. All we're saying, we've done social science research, environmental survey. When you use your ODK or Kobo column, once you leave there, it uploads.
Exactly.
And it hits the server.
And
So-
like you said, during the last elections, most of those results were transmitted within 72 hours
Yes.
of the elections.
And there was
Does that
also-
still represent real time?
Yes, it's within real time, even though there was a delay from the presidential. But let's even look at the recent elections we've had in the off cycle now. We've seen that if you have 98% of results on the portal by the end of the election, it shows that it's working. And there was an audit of our infrastructure that shows that in majority of our polling units, we have access. And let me also mention that countries like Ghana, I was in a place where the Electoral Commission of Ghana said they came and understudied Nigeria. Even Kenya, you know, Kenya had issues when they took away the manual and they have both manual and electronic. They said they understudied Nigeria. Ghana said their success in the last election because they introduced electronic transmission was from Nigeria. So these are some of the things. So if people are understudying us to achieve success, why are we bringing that? So for me, these are debates that are meant to cause distraction and to not allow people. And it's going to even distract ANEC if we are not careful.
Victor, I'm coming to you now.
Okay.
Now, in situations like we had in 2023, if there is a glitch of any sort, well, perhaps I'll come back to you on that. Does that invalidate the entire election, for instance, if the officiating, the INEC official is unable to transmit the results real time? Because the emphasis has been on real time. Will that invalidate the outcome of that election and all of that? And what could actually prevent real-time transmission from your technical perspective?
The straightforward answer to that is no, it does not invalidate it. First of all, we are transmitting results, not e-voting. So it could be a thing we could deploy the hybrid method. This is the physical copy. Take a snapshot of it. And on the BVAS device, we are all aware it's not accessible to anybody. this is a government property. So encryption have been deployed, implemented on that device, such that altering its content that has been uploaded is near impossible, except if it's INEC themselves that want to now compromise that device itself. But in reality, considering the number of BVAS devices we have nationwide, how many of them would they want to compromise at a time? So, and again, the answer is when we talk of real time, like Madam just mentioned, within 72 hours time frame, it is not a thing of whether there's network in that region or not. The moment you are out of that region, automatically the data will upload and deliver to the IREF portal. So the question here is whether you are transmitting on that, at that spot or not, the result is still very much valid. There is, okay, if we are complaining about people that are possibly going to hack into the system, why is there no emphasis on the malfunctioning and misalterations that have been happening on the physical paper, on the ballot papers before they even get to the INEC office?
Yes.
So these are things we need to consider. And in most cases, what we are looking at is validating and verifying that the data we have on the BVAS device is same with the one that is arriving with the physical one.
Yes.
So any alteration, any delay within a certain time frame do not invalidate that particular election. It's just a matter of, okay, we concluded our election at this polling unit today, and by the time we finished, we get to a city or a place where that device was able to access internet, it simply automatically uploaded the data. So at what point was there malfunctioning or alteration on that result? So in fact, more emphasis should be on the device, because there are higher chances of the device being more secure than the ballot papers being altered. There are cases where you are carrying ballot boxes and people from nowhere appear and they destroy the entire data, that the whole vote for the day. You render the entire polling unit invalid, or the results from there become something else. And sometimes they move away with the boxes, and from nowhere, new set of boxes that have been printed appears from nowhere. So will that data actually be same with the one that is on the BVAS device? The answer is no. So there should be more priority on the data being on the results being transmitted through the BVAS, through the IREF portal, because that is more authentication. It has more authenticity than the paper. Why? There are encryption algorithms.
And that's what has been happening, isn't it?
It's exactly.
Exactly, because I went back to look at clauses 38 and 48 of the INEC regulations and guidelines.
Yes.
And those clauses clearly mandates mandatory electronic transmission of results by the presiding officer to the collation system.
Yes.
And to the IREF. Is there clearly. Are we not being sentimental when we say, oh, it must now be in the Electoral Act when it's already in the guidelines and regulations? And the Supreme Court has decided that these guidelines that are contingent on this Electoral Act 2022, for instance, or any Electoral Act that will come up eventually, are as good as being as valid as the laws in the Electoral Act.
Okay, so the first thing is I think maybe out of fear, out of what is at stake in this coming election, I think we are...
There's always something at stake in every election.
I think so this issue of electronic transmission of results and is it immediate transmission? What's the language?
Real-time.
Real-time. I think the introduction of the word real-time transmission, it's I don't want to say it's a deliberate ploy at confusion, or because the way the BVAS work and the way we send, the results to IREF portal, it has not always been, the issue of real time or no real time has not always come up because, depending on when or where there's network, once you snap it, it goes straight to the portal. Those who want to access it can access it at the IREF portal immediately. If there's no network, you can access it. So the issue of real time does not actually occur. So I think we are confused. A lot of persons are confusing themselves when it comes to this issue of real time, wanting to make sure it is real time. I think it's unnecessary at this stage. What is important is once it is sent to the IREF portal, It is, everybody can access it, or anybody who has the resources can access it. And for where there are no network, once you move away from that particular point, you know, some people are even talking about having access to Starlinks in few places where we know there might not be such network. So the issue of real time or no real time, I think is a bit of confusion. But notwithstanding, let me just go back again to this issue of mandatory use of transmission in the INEC guideline. In this same Electoral Act was what was used in the 2023 election. And at the point of voting, at the point of collation, this issue of mandatory transmission came up. And at the last point, INEC withdrew from what it has said, that in regards to transmission of results. INEC withdrew, INEC reneged on the promises it had made all over the world. When this issue was raised in court, what the court decided was that INEC guideline, that the fact that INEC has stated that this was what it was going to do, the doctrine of legitimate expectation, the court did not, put INEC feet to the fire. The court actually allowed INEC to legally renege on that agreement, on that position. So that is what people are trying to guide against at this point in time.
Okay. Victor, very quickly, in 60 seconds, if you can.
Yes.
Is there a possibility, given what we are dealing with right now, that the INEC server, because there are two systems, the collation system and the IREP, there are two separate systems. Is there a possibility that they could be hacked from your knowledge of technology?
First off, there is no system that's 100% secure. But we having that knowledge, we enable us to put the right encryption algorithm and technologies in place to mitigate against every form of possible attack. So if we have this in place by INEC, there are slimmer chances of anybody gaining access into that infrastructure. It's like, this is what we have. Okay. And by all means, all emphasis are on that device. If we are using devices across different poly units to transmit, how many of the persons on the street have the technical know-how to actually bypass those devices to hacking into them? So
we are seeing people on the streets now hacking or wiretapping the NSA's communication.
Well, like I said, until proven, it's still...
No, they have admitted openly, so it's not
we don't have results yet. We 100% agree.
Sophia, your final word, very quickly.
My final word is that these are just intentional steps by the political actors to cause confusion among citizens, and by the time you turn around, you see that you realize that the election has been manipulated and they've taken over. So we should not be discouraged. We should not be confused by all these political gimmicks.
Okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady. Mr. Victor Idono, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant, Certified Network Security Specialist, a Certified Ethical Hacker and Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And Sophia Akusin is the Head of Research and Knowledge Management at Yaga Africa, and of course, Barrister Victor Okpatola, an Abuja-based lawyer, and is the convener of Lawyers for Civil Liberties. Thank you so much for your time. All right, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Of course, the issues will be on the front burner. Bye for now.
Nigerian filmmaker Paul Cast is putting the finishing touches to his latest movie, Just the Two of Us. The project is due for release in April, and Cast says he's hoping it will hit big.
The storyline was mainly around a couple and how they were able to go through their journeys and go through lots of highs and lows, mainly trying to typify the kind of struggle that could come in when people are in relationships.
A former psychology student, Cast launched his movie career in 2019. In terms of output, Nigeria's film industry, or Nollywood, is the second largest in the world, behind India's Bollywood, producing over 1,000 movies annually. In December, the Nigerian movie A Tribe Called Judah became the first movie to earn 1 billion naira, equivalent to about $1.1 million at the domestic box office. Tribe Called Judah cast member Olumide Oworu says the movie about a single mother and her 5 sons struggling to make ends meet is a common Nigerian story.
I think everybody that saw the movie just saw a bit of themselves.